I suppose the obvious question is, if he doesn't like what his attorney general is doing, why doesn't he either tell him to do something different or fire him?
Yeah, I think he's walking a fine line here. Remember, Jeff Sessions recused himself very early on in this case because he had a conflict of interest. It's sort of strange to see the president in one tweet saying Peter Strzok should have recused himself and then say Jeff Sessions, who has recused himself, should unrecuse himself. So, he may choose to do that at some point, but I think he's trying to sort of pressure people into doing his work for him at this point.
There's no evidence that I've seen thus far that attempt to pressure is having any effect. It doesn't seem that Mr. Mueller's changing his behavior or Attorney General Sessions, Rod Rosenstein, or anything else. So where does this all end? I mean, what would happen if the president actually did fire Jeff Sessions and got rid of Mueller?
Yeah, agreed. It hasn't had any impact on the Mueller team. To his credit, I think Mueller presses straight ahead. He's very focused on the facts and the law and building up the case that he has. If the president were to fire Sessions or Rosenstein or Mueller, I think the remedy would have to be a political one. I don't see any legal way to come back from that. I don't think somebody could sue to be reinstated, for example. And I think you'd see a political response, if any.
On that second tweet that David was just alluding to, the president also saying that Bob Mueller is totally conflicted, and his 17 angry Democrats that are doing his dirty work are a disgrace to the USA. We have seen the president mention the conflict of interest earlier this week as well. Any idea what he could be alluding to, or whether or not it could impact the Mueller probe?
Yeah, I mean, earlier this week, the president gave a little more detail into what he believes is Mueller's conflict of interest. He said we have an unresolved business dispute, apparently over greens fees or something at a country club. I don't think that quite rises to the level that would require recusal. And in fact, Mueller ran that conflict through the Department of Justice proper chains, and they came out, and you can understand why, as doesn't require recusal.
Of course, today is also day 2 of Paul Manafort's trial. This trial in itself, little to do with the Russian meddling investigation, but how significant is it? What happens on this trial to the credibility of the broader Mueller investigation?
Yeah, this trial is big on 2 levels. Just to start, so much happens in this case so quickly, but let's not lose sight of the fact that we have the President of the United States' campaign manager being tried in federal court for tens of millions of dollars worth of fraud. That's a big deal. That's a historic case. And beyond that, this trial is going to be an important bellwether for the Mueller investigation. Even though it does not directly impact election interference, if there's a conviction, it'll be an important moment of legitimacy for the Mueller investigation. And if it's not a conviction, then I'm sure that Trump and others will declare that this is more proof that it's a rigged witch hunt.
And in the meantime, it's not clear what the president's position is on Mr. Manafort. On the one hand, he was tweeting today, it's terrible. He's being treated worse than they treated Al Capone, he says, because they put him in solitary confinement. On the other hand, he says, he only worked for me a very short period of time. So is he embracing Paul Manafort, or is he distancing himself?
Yeah, he's back and forth. Originally, of course, when Manafort was the campaign manager, the president loved him and believed in him and said very positive things. And then when Manafort was remanded for witness tampering, the president said he got a raw deal. And then over the last week or so, the president's been saying he barely worked for me and I barely know the guy and who is this guy? And then today it's right back to where we started, saying he's getting a raw deal. So it's been going back and forth.
And we're talking about this with David earlier before the show. The president and also his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, seem to be emphasizing the fact that, first of all, there's no collusion, and even if there was, that wouldn't be a crime. So when it comes to the federal criminal code here in the United States, where do we stand on collusion?
It's a wordplay. You can look through that federal criminal code. You will not see the word collusion, except in a limited antitrust area that has no application here. Remember, Mueller and his team have never used the word collusion in any of their court filings. The president keeps using that term, and I would call it sleight of hand, but yeah. I don't think anyone's fooled.
There is a word conspiracy, though, that Mr. Mueller's used quite a few times, which is not that far from collusion.
It's a synonym. I mean, there's no law in the books called a shakedown, but there's a law called extortion, and it's the same thing.